Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Let's jump right in. Oh, it's not working. Thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing young woman named Alana Vera. Alana is here today to talk about her struggles with lupus and how she came to reverse her symptoms naturally, and she did it on accident, which is kind of cool. I'm excited to hear about this one. She has so much to share with us around the topic of healing foods, healing words, and how she has come to clear her mindset through healing her inner child, eating healthy, and becoming aligned with herself. Welcome, lady.
Thank you so much for the gracious introduction. I appreciate it.
Yes. Girl, thank you so much for being here. You were on my round table now called Impact Panels last month on the subject of narcissistic
abuse. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm so excited for this podcast, not even kidding. You had so much information, like amazing information that touched me, whether I was on stage or backstage, that hit me so beautifully, not like hard, but just like resonated with me so much that literally after that podcast, we got off, went about our business. I checked my calendar to see when I was going to be interviewing you next because
I love that. Oh my god.
Because I was so excited to sit down with you and just pick your brain and just a little bit more on what you know. There's so much information that we have that we don't always get the chance to share. And I loved your vibe and everything that you stood for and how far you've come. And I think the other thing was just you're young, like you're a young soul. And I just appreciate where you are mentally in comparison to where I was mentally at that point. And I love it. I love where you are. And I'm so excited to see where you go and what you can accomplish by the time you reach my age, and just excited for you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate the kind words, Sabrina. I've always been kind of called an old soul, so there might be something to that as well.
Yes, I totally agree with you. So listen, I want to jump right in. There's a few different avenues that we're kind of going to be covering here, and I hope that it flows nicely for the people who are already watching live and for the people who are jumping on a little bit later or watching this in the replay. But I'd love for you to kind of just open up about, who you were as a child, your teenage years, and kind of like what you looked like, what you believed in, what your world kind of looked like when you were a little bit younger.
Oh yeah, such a great question. So I guess when I was younger, I've always been a creative person. So I've always been, creating things, whether it be art, music. And I guess, around like middle school age, I kind of had some social traumas and things like that. And I kind of went more introverted, even though I think I'm actually kind of a more extroverted personality. And so, that kind of affected me hard, and it kind of affected the way, that I related also to, my parents, and, my mom and I kind of got a little enmeshed. So, that was a little bit, hard to overcome. So I feel like some of those things, definitely kind of, obviously it was on the narcissism panel. So I think some of those traumas definitely had an impact, into my later life. But, I was always very, academic, and I funneled a lot of my energy into just everything that I was trying to accomplish. I've always been very career oriented. So when I was in high school, I decided, I wanted to graduate a year early because I wanted to pursue music. So I completed my studies. I did summer school so I could get through everything quicker. And I just knew what I wanted to do at that time. So I ended up graduating and then going to school for audio engineering. I went to school in Arizona. It was about a year-long program. And then when I was 18, I ended up moving out to Los Angeles and completing my internship for that program there at East West Studios, which is a pretty big studio. They've got a lot of, I met Justin Timberlake while I was there, Jessie J. It was a pretty cool experience. But then I started, I wanted to, I always like to do everything myself, I guess. So I'm always very DIY type of person. I have a lot of different interests, kind of multi-passionate, I guess you could say. So I built up my recording studio in my apartment in Hollywood. And at that apartment, so I created my first album. It was amazing. I recorded, produced, I did all the things on my album. I was very passionate about pursuing my music career. But, some things kind of definitely went through a lot of traumas during that period in my life. I experienced for the first time in my earlier 20s, depression and anxiety. So I started, basically I got on the track of inner healing. And I started working with a therapist who was somatic. She was a somatic therapist, so very in tune with connecting the mind and the body. But it was also, it opened up a lot of things as well. When we start to do our inner work, sometimes it's like, oh, there's that can of worms,
100%.
Yeah. So, just kind of unpacked some of those things. And I guess, I had a series of, different relationships, at that age. I kind of was in my first kind of more serious relationship when I was going through this process of inner work kind of for the first time in that way. But nothing abusive or anything at that time. Just, not maybe the healthiest relationship, but definitely I wouldn't call it abusive. And then I went through, I had other traumas that surfaced. I was a sexual assault survivor twice by two different men. Unfortunately, I feel like there was a lot that I was actually running away from inside when I had gone through those things. And, I ended up meeting this who is now the Narcissistic Ex. And he, at the time, of course, he seemed like the best thing in the world. A lot of things were going on at that time. Everything kind of just, my grandfather had recently passed away. So my family was kind of also in a state of trauma. Of course, I was too. It was really the hardest death, I think, that any of us had really experienced in the family. He was just very loved. And it was just, I was never, I'll just put it this way, I was never a coffee drinker or this or that, but I felt like I needed all kinds of stimulants and stuff to get over that whole situation. And so I had, and at that same time, I also had results from my doctor. I had been seeing a rheumatologist ever since I was 13. And that was actually when I had that kind of social trauma too. So I really do believe a lot of the health issues that I had were very connected to the emotional challenges that I had as well. We can't separate the mind and the body. When we have an emotion, we have there's chemistry that gets set off, and that affects our body. So I had been seeing a rheumatologist ever since I was 13. I had positive ANA, which basically is like like a warning sign you could have something, in some kind of rheumatological issue or autoimmune issue. And so they were always kind of like on the lookout for lupus or, scleroderma, things like that. And all the rest of my blood work had always been fine. But my blood work had come back and my doctor had said that I had low C3C and low C4C levels. And she said that it looked like I might have something in the lupus family. And the thing is, I had started to also unravel some of the things along the medical side of things where I had actually, because I had been, when I was 13, not only did I have this positive ANA, I also had acid reflux. And I was diagnosed with that, and I was put on a medication for I was on it for 7 years.
Wow.
And you're not in this medication, as it turns out, I started learning that there were many lawsuits for kidney failure and very serious things for being on this medication longer than 8 weeks.
Oh my.
Yeah. And so that was actually that's also very emotionally traumatic as well to learn that. And then, so that was going on. And I was like, I don't know that I want to take this medical route. I don't want to just be put on medications. I want to get to the root cause. I've always been very passionate about, let me get to the root of this. I didn't know what that was going to be. So I just kind of I set it aside for a while. I got the doctor told me I might have something in the lupus family. I never actually got an official diagnosis. I just said, I'm not going to go down this path because she already wanted me to start medications and I didn't have any symptoms of anything.
Wow.
So I put it aside. And then, I think it was about probably a year after that is when I met the Narcissistic Ex, who again was amazing at the time I met him.
Yeah.
They
always are. They always are.
Yeah. So, I had all these things that had happened with, family trauma and then this health stuff, and then the sexual assault and all these things, a lot of it not really fully processed. Met this guy. When I met him, there were shootings on my street starting to happen. That happened twice within the 3 months that I had, the first 3 months of having met him. So it was my area was starting to feel dangerous. Just so much was happening, and I ended up moving in with him very quickly. My apartment, there was a lot of issues going on in my apartment as well. There were mold issues. One of my neighbors, she had a child, a baby, and her baby almost died because of black mold. And the apartment was, they were very irresponsible. They did not want to take care of this. It took her so much effort for them to fix the problem. And then she got retaliated against. She got her car egged, all kinds of crazy things. And I tried to stand up for myself because I had some mold issues as well. I don't know that it was necessarily black mold, but I definitely had some mold issues that weren't being taken care of properly. They were just painting over it. Basically, it was bleaching it, but painting over. Yeah. I mean, bleaching it apparently doesn't actually really get rid of it. You're supposed to actually take out the drywall.
Yeah.
But anyway, so they weren't fixing it properly. I wanted it fixed properly, especially because I was, again, trying to get to the root of health issues. I was like, okay, is this related to mold? I don't know. Maybe I need to ask them to fix this problem. And so I got retaliated against. They were yelling at me in all caps. I mean, I may have mentioned okay, this could be grounds for a lawsuit. So I might have triggered them a little bit, but nonetheless, they were turning off my utilities, my hot water. They turned that off,
wow,
illegal stuff. They were messing with me so bad. So it was very, very, very stressful. And, this is my home, my place that I'm supposed to feel, safe and comfortable. And then I had family stuff going on at the same time. So all these things, it was just the perfect storm where everything was so stressful. And so I ended up moving in with the narcissist. And, it was kind of interesting. On the, when I met him, we were, we spent all our time together, literally everything. And he was, was always at my place a lot, and he would be making food. And he was actually, so he was vegan. And I wasn't at the time. At the time I was doing a high protein diet. But then when you mentioned, healing something on accident, it was actually more hormonal acne that I ended up healing on accident. So what happened was, because I had all this like just terrible acne, I had gotten off of birth control after my previous relationship, and I started having these horrible acne problems, and
Wow.
I couldn't really figure out, again, I wanted to get to the root of things. I wanted to do things naturally, but I was struggling to figure out like how to get there, because I was trying things that people were talking about, using essential oils and stuff like that on my skin. And I tried that, and it worked maybe for like 2 weeks, and then it didn't. So I was just, and I didn't want to do, I was recommended Accutane, which has all kinds of side effects and with suicide and things like that. And because I had previously experienced depression, I was like, I think that's not a good idea. Like, I could be at risk. That doesn't sound like a good idea. So, so I just kind of like, again, it's like, okay, well, I want to get to the root of the issue, but I guess I'm going to push this aside because I don't really know what else to do. So I met my ex, who was vegan, and he was making all these foods, and I just wasn't, I was kind of like just going along with it. It was kind of lazy, maybe not really cooking, letting him cook for me. And about a week went by, and I noticed that I hadn't eaten meat or dairy in a week, and I hadn't really even thought about it. And I was like, like, I wonder what will happen if I just keep going. So I went for another week, and I looked in the mirror, and my skin was clear, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Yeah. So I knew I had to keep going with it. And, it's just so funny because, my ex was very much like, he was kind of trying to tell me like, well, he's like, well, when I eat meat or he's like, I break out, like, and I was just like, oh, like, it's like, until you really experience it yourself, it doesn't always click. So once I had the experience though, like, oh my gosh, like, this is really like, this works. I just kept going with that. But needless to say, with all the stress and everything that I was dealing with, I don't think that helped in terms of, the autoimmune symptoms eventually surfacing, because they didn't surface right away. So I ended up moving in with him after a couple months of meeting him. And then we, so then I was doing the vegan thing, but because of all the stress of the moving, moving is stressful in and of itself, but moving out of such a toxic apartment and then into his place, there was like renovations going on. And, I was stressed about that too, because like, it was kind of an older place, most places in Los Angeles are old. So then you're looking at, okay, well, he's got a popcorn ceiling. Is there going to be asbestos? That's not, like all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So, I was really concerned about my health because of all the health issues I had, that I was having, or had previously, or was on the lookout for. So anyway, so I get there, probably it was a slow trickle of things, but at the worst point in my health journey, I was waking up in the morning with my hands shut in fists. It was very hard to open them. It would take several hours for them to open. And
wow.
It was the weirdest thing. And it's like, it was hard to just like brush my teeth or even like put on my pants. You use your hands for everything.
So wait, to go like this?
Yeah, it was just like very slow. Like it was like, I think it was like a neurological thing or something, but it was just, so I don't know if it was specifically, if that was a lupus thing, if it was MS or whatever, like, I don't know. I never actually got it confirmed. Also at the same time, politically, there was a lot going on in our country with, the elections and, what was happening. I was scared that the healthcare, like if I had a pre-existing condition, because there were like threats of the healthcare being taken away. And so I was scared to even get a diagnosis, because I was like, well, is this going to be something that prevents me from getting other healthcare? And I didn't want to be, I just knew, even if I got the diagnosis, I was like, well, I don't want to take this route of the medications. So it was just one of those things. It's like my intuition, like I knew there was another way. I just didn't know what it was yet. And I kept following that. And eventually, again, my ex, he was like, well, this person helped me with my health before. Like, let's go talk to her. She worked at a health food store. And it actually took me more than one time to go to her to actually get like the real answer that I needed. Because at first she was like, oh, and this was before I think things were super serious. But she was like, oh, you know, maybe you need to do paleo or something like that, which wasn't like, that wasn't doing it. You know, I did not heal until I went 100% raw vegan. Like I got the cooked foods out, like all that stuff. But eventually she said to me, like the second time I saw her, she was like, you need to just juice. And she was like, and I was like, okay. And she was like, yeah, like, you know, like, I don't care if it's smoothies or juices, like you just need to go raw. Like I did it for like 2 months and I forget what specific issue, I think it was autoimmune related, that she was able to like heal or at least improve. And I was just like, wait, you did juices for 2 months and you survived? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, like my mindset shifted. And the thing is too, like I started doing some research on YouTube. And it was honestly on YouTube, it was easier to find things than it is now. A lot of things now are like shadow banned and it's harder to find.
Yeah.
But I found Dr. Robert Morse and I was listening to him talk, and he's a naturopathic doctor, and he's very, very big on fruits, berries, and melons and herbs. And he's all about like the raw vegan way. And I was just like, when I saw this, you know, when you see something on YouTube and you just search for something, you don't know the person, you're just like, okay, like I don't know, like, is what he's saying like really serious? Like I'm not sure if this is possible. Like, how can I just eat fruits and vegetables all day and that's it? And at the same time, my intuition was telling me like, try this.
Yeah.
And I it wasn't until I met this woman in person, someone that I felt like, okay, this is through someone that I felt like, you know, I could know and trust. And she actually did this herself, that I could say, oh, this is confirmation that this is what I need to do. So once I got that like confirmation, then I just went full in. And what I actually found for myself was that when I would eat vegetables, my hands would kind of spasm. I would be waking up in the middle of the night, like I couldn't sleep right. When I just did fruit, that's where I actually did heal. And this was what Dr. Robert Morse was talking about as well, was that like it confirmed what he was saying about, you know, like especially when you have like real serious like neurological type issues, like the high fruits. He always recommends the high fruits because that's there's so much electricity and our nervous system is electric. So when we're eating all these electric fruits and they're moving that lymphatic system, it gives us that chance to regenerate and flush that stuff out. So I actually did nothing but fruits for 9 months. Like that's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now when you say that, is that eating, juicing, and smoothing, or how did you do that?
Yeah. So I did, you know, and I did like during that time, I was always trying to experiment with vegetables because I was always like in my head, like, you know, because we're always taught vegetables, right? So I think in my head,
and we're also taught that fruit has a lot of sugar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of mindset elements to like, we have to unlearn everything that we've been taught, and that's hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was always trying to experiment with the vegetables, but every time I would experiment with it, my body would freak out. So yeah, I did juices, I did smoothies. I was able to here and there like get away with some higher fat fruits like avocado and coconut, but there were other times where I had to actually take those out and just do you know, just I guess what you would think is normal fruits. Like I think a lot of people maybe don't think of an avocado or a coconut as a fruit, but botanically I guess it's a fruit. I think coconut might be a nut, but but anyway, I was able to mostly do I did a lot of melons. I did a lot of grapes. Literally, I actually connected with like wholesalers so that I could get in like by the case. I would get, you know, yeah. So I went through some pretty crazy, you know, just noticing like as I was eliminating things, then I was actually starting to notice like what would trigger symptoms. And so even there were certain fruits that I would be sensitive to. And if it wasn't organic, for a long time, I couldn't touch non-organic. I couldn't even do non-local fruits because like when we ship fruits in, they get blanched into hot water. So it's like my body was recognizing it as like not being raw. And so it would freak out.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. But I think, you know, a lot of this, like now looking back from where I'm at, I can see, you know, on the one hand, like, yeah, maybe those aren't like, maybe it's always good to have like organic, the freshest, etc. But I also think that my fight or flight system was very, very hijacked. And so I think my body physiologically was also having a little bit of like a PTSD almost. And so I've learned that from, because I also had, I had multiple chemical sensitivity, and it's still something I have to be mindful of. It's still something I'm working on healing from in that regard. But it's improved dramatically, and it's improved as a result of healing a lot of the PTSD, and as a result of doing something called neural retraining, where I did a lot of like visualization of, you know, positive memories, and also doing those things while I'm around a trigger to help my body reset and like be in a more blissful state instead of being in that fight or flight state. So it's been such a journey to do, like, to combine all these things together, but it's that's why it's so important to address both the emotional and the physical level, because yes, on the one hand, we want to make sure we're eating like healthy foods and raw foods. I'm 100% believer in raw foods. I still eat raw food, a raw food lifestyle today. And I've done a mixture of, you know, high, like, you know, now I can eat some cooked foods and things like that too. But I mean, I listen to my body, but at the same time, I've also done a lot of work with, you know, healing the PTSD and the inner child work. And that has also influenced my physical healing and my physical health as well. So they're so connected. You know, and then of course, like the traumas, that we experience, like, you know, as domestic violence survivors, you know, that can affect us in so many different ways. It's so important that we take care of our physical health too.
100%. When you say, for those listening now on on live, and for those listening on the replay, can you? Not everybody is in tune with their body. So when you're saying I listen to my body, but what the frick does that mean? You know, can you kind of explain to those that don't know what that means, one? And then the other thing is, there, while you were talking, you mentioned like sometimes I can add in avocado and coconut, sometimes I can't. How do you know when you can and what you can't? What is your body saying to you during those two?
Oh, good question. So I'll start with the last question, which was about the coconut avocado. So that was kind of a temporary, well, actually I'm kind of not doing fat right now, now that I think about it, but I pay attention to like if I have symptomology of for example, I was noticing when I first was going raw vegan and doing the fruits, 100% fruits pretty much, I was paying attention to like my hands, and like paying attention to, because I do have a little bit of like scleroderma type of like callousing, it looks like on my fingers. And I would notice it would get inflamed when I would eat the fats. Oh, wow. So like it would get red, and I'd be like, maybe I shouldn't eat the fat. So I stopped eating the fat, and now I'm noticing my body isn't really liking fat so much. Like I'll get a little bit of like anxiety almost. So I'm kind of just, I have to kind of go easy. And I think it has to do with like the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, you know, and of course with everything that I've gone through as well, it's like, of course I'm still, you know, my body is still a little sensitive to some things. So, you know, I just pay attention to what my body, I track, like, you know, if I eat this, what happens? Like, oh, I noticed, you know, if I, and this is something that's, you know, taken time. It's taken a few years to dial this in, and it's still getting dialed in. But I noticed, for example, you know, food combining is a big thing that we talk about in the raw vegan world, which means like we want to make sure that we're eating foods that digest well together. And what I would notice is like, okay, well, if I eat this and this food together, I get bloated. So I actually probably shouldn't do that. So there's a little bit of like a science to it too. You got to track, you know, what you're eating, and then also pay attention to how is your body responding. So it's just getting mindful about it. It's nothing, you know, really crazy. I mean, I definitely would say, you know, a lot of people, when you say like, okay, listen to your body, like, yeah, that can be confusing, because it's like, well, my body's telling me I want a burger. So is that?
Yes, some people might say that.
Yeah. So it's, you know, I guess that phrase could be hard to really say, okay, yeah, it's using your mind and your body together and making smart decisions based upon what you're observing in mind, body, emotions, and spirit. Like it's all got to come to, all these are tools to help us to along our path. And, you know, for me, meditating has helped me get more in touch with my body and make more of that connection, help my mind kind of rest a little bit more as far as, you know, maybe some thoughts that are just kind of noise and anxiety or whatever, and calming that down, getting in tune with, you know, the actual physical feeling in my body, and just allowing myself to feel what that is, because a lot of times we're trying to distract ourselves from things that are uncomfortable. Yeah. And so it's very easy to do that, and easy to get, you know, we can distract ourselves with social media, we can distract ourselves with work. Like there's so many ways to do that. But when we just sit still, we have to just listen and see what's there. So it takes practice, you know, and again, I started this journey really, like I said, in my earlier 20s, when I was for the first time doing that inner work and doing the somatic therapy and getting in touch with my body. So I feel like as a survivor of domestic violence, I'm kind of like lucky. I already had that foundation. I think a lot of survivors don't have that foundation at all. You know, maybe they're just repeating patterns from childhood, or, you know, they've never explored this world, their inner world at all. And I already had that foundation. So for me, it was just almost like, well, this is obviously, my relationship was on fire, right? Like everything was, that's all horrible stuff to experience. But I was able to use, okay, those tools, that foundation, and then dive deeper into the inner child work. Once I found that gave me the next step to say, oh, this is the layer maybe I was missing even before, that I actually wish I would have had in my early 20s, because maybe I actually wouldn't have been in therapy for 2 years and felt like, you know, and then maybe I wouldn't have gotten in this, you know, the sexual assault situation, who knows, like, but, you know, it's a journey to figure these things out. And I do think that, you know, if anyone's watching this that feels like, man, I feel disconnected from my body. I think the easiest way to start would be with meditation and just listening to the sensations, and try to practice not just trying to run away all the time. But the inner child work, I find that to be helpful, because it's also important to validate like the parts of us that do want to run away, and understanding that those are just parts of us that want to protect us. And what's beautiful about that is we can actually engage with that part of us and find out, because that's our subconscious running. You know, a lot of times we don't realize it, but like automatically we just pick up our phone, or automatically we just, you know, whatever, we start working, or whatever your poison is, right? Grab the burger or the cigarette or whatever. And we don't realize that it's actually, there's a part of us trying to protect us from something. And when we actually use the tools of the inner child work, we can actually have a dialogue with our inner child and update it to our present adult self to bring it to safety, bring it through a process. It's called an unburdening process, where we release the burden that it carried from childhood. A lot of times our inner child thinks it is the burden, and we have to detach it from that and allow it to be released. And we can feel that in our body. We can feel that physical release. And also that can change the habits that we choose. So whether it's unhealthy eating or unhealthy relationships, regardless of what we're using as maybe a clutch or a distraction, we can start to do that inner child work to allow that to loosen up, so we don't have to cling to those things so hard, and we can actually start to make more empowered decisions, again, whether it's relationships or health or just our life in general.
100%. When you're talking about, you know, the work that's gone into, you know, your mental state and where you are now mentally and emotionally, what do you think can you explain the difference? So, you know, whether you went through this mental state or not, you look the same, you know what I mean? Like you are still who you are. Can you kind of explain the mental, the emotional of who you were then versus who you are now, mentally and emotionally?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So do you mean in the abusive relationship?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say it was just in that period of my life. I felt very, very triggered, very activated, very, I guess you could say defensive. Like just, I was paranoid about everything. I was, you know, uncovering these things, you know, about like my medical journey, which was triggering. And so then I was questioning intentions of everybody as well. And I didn't trust anyone really except for the ex. Like, he was like the one person I kind of trusted. And I think in many ways, because he kind of opened my eyes and to, like, for example, the vegan diet and like all these things. And I think I kind of felt like, wow, he sees something that the rest of the world doesn't, and which may still be true, but at the same time, it doesn't take away from the fact that it was an unhealthy and toxic and abusive relationship. But I was just very like, I would just say kind of paranoid in some way, because I just didn't know who to trust. And I think like now it's like there's a lot more, like it's definitely still something in terms of trust. I think I've been able to build that more with friends and family, but still sometimes there's that element of like, ooh, can I, especially I think, of course, family, because there was family trauma, that trust piece comes up a lot for me still with them specifically. But I think like with friends, it doesn't, I feel like that's not so much of an issue like the way that it was before. But I would say like, yeah, that was like the biggest thing, was probably just being very, and then it wasn't even, honestly, not just the health piece, but then I was starting to learn things about other industries as well, like at the same time, when it comes to like energy and clean energy and all kinds of stuff. So it was like, I was seeing things on like and the political climate, just like everything that was going on at the time, just, I was taking in all that stuff. And I think the filter probably that I was seeing everything through was just like, wow, the world is really, really messed up.
Yeah. 100%. No, I totally get that.
Yeah. And now I think I see, well, I mean, first of all, I feel like I see a lot of things changing and I see a lot of the positivity, but I think because I was just so, at the time, because everything in my world was just me, my ex, and like the health issues, that just, it's like, that seemed like the only thing that existed in some ways. And then once I started working, started working at Tesla for a little while, and like, I started meeting other people, and then it was like, oh, of course, there's like other people that think, the same way, and it wasn't just him. And then I also started seeing like some changes like in my family and our interactions, and just seeing that like, hey, like maybe not everybody is like, out to get me or something, so I mean, of course you still got to be cautious about people, right, that you don't know, but yeah, it just, I think I've started to see more like a glimpse of just other things besides just us. And this, I felt like, because it was like when I was with him, it was like me and him against the world kind of thing. Like, let's do this and let's try to change this and make this better. But we couldn't even, like, our relationship, we couldn't even figure that out. Like, so how are we supposed to, change the world?
Exactly.
We can't even figure out our own relationship,
Exactly. I wanted to ask, I know that you said that you weren't like officially diagnosed with lupus, but as far as that goes, and, any of the other realms that it could have been in that same family, what do you think, knowing what you know now, foods, mindset, and all that stuff, what do you think is the biggest myth around lupus and like that family of whatever you were dealing with?
Oh man. So I guess like just the biggest myth about just health in general and diseases is that like there's these mystery diseases that aren't curable. That somehow that the chemistry we put into our bodies has no impact, but the chemistry we take in terms of drugs is what we're looking for. Like that doesn't really add up.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is just we're not focused on, lifestyle, and we're not focused on, hey, let's study and look at what kinds of foods should we be eating versus let's study and try to come up with a fix to a symptom, which is just a Band-Aid to something. So, a lot of us that when we get into, diagnoses and autoimmune, I actually like, in studying Dr. Morrison and also going through my experience, like it really doesn't actually even matter what my diagnosis would have been, which is why on some other levels, like, yeah, I think again, my intuition was probably right. And it's like, screw getting the diagnosis. We don't need to do that. Like, let's just find the solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you know, because a lot of times we'll be like trying to like, oh, let's get, okay, well, this problem, let's try to fix it with this. And this problem, let's try to fix it with this. But once you get to like the core, like the root of something like that can have this domino effect in other ways. And like, we're all the human species. So we're not all eating, we shouldn't really all be eating like this grand different diet, whatever. Like, it's not really that complicated, which is why, you know, Dr. Robert Morris, he's always promoting like, we are frugivores. Like, our closest relatives are chimpanzees. And what are they eating all day?
Bananas, fruits.
Yep. Yes, exactly. Yeah. We're tropical animals. Like I'm wearing a jacket because it's like I'm in Chicago, you know. Yeah. But like if we didn't have modern, you know, electricity and things like this, would not be a climate that we could actually really survive in without, you know, like just making adjustments to our environment. So we really are supposed to be eating more of these raw fruits and vegetables because that's where our climate is actually naturally oriented. So if we start actually feeding our bodies what they're supposed to be running on, it's like, you know, if we have a car that is supposed to be running on, you know, premium and you're trying to throw like diesel in it or something, like it's going to have problems somewhere. And maybe it won't show up the same in every single car. Maybe on the one car, something goes wrong with the engine on some specific part, and some cars another thing. Like, but at the end of the day, we need to clear. We're not eating foods that are helping us clean and clear our lymphatic system, which is supposed to be something that, you know, a lot of us might know, whether you know or not, but you'll know now. When we exercise, we are moving lymphatic waste, which is basically all of our cells eat and poop, and when they have this waste, it goes into our lymphatic system. And that's actually like 70% of the fluid in our body, whereas our blood is like the 25% or whatever. So like that's the blood was what we're always studying, but that's actually not even where the main problem is. It's in our lymphatic system. So exercising is great, but it also does produce lactic acid. And if you're healing, and a lot of times your body is acidic. So my body was very acidic. I couldn't really do a lot of exercise for a long time. And I'm excited that I can do more now. But you know, the fruits will actually move the lymphatic system as well, not just the exercise, and that will do that without the lactic acid. So that was really just so cleansing and so healing. I will say, just as a side note, because a lot of people think, you know, once you start eating healthy, like everything's great and grand. It doesn't work that way, because when you start healing your body, that's when you actually start coming up across challenges where you have maybe a healing crisis. You know, for example, when I started going, and this is what also can make it hard to move forward and even believe that this is the way forward, because you get these like symptoms and you go, oh my gosh, it's the fruit is causing this problem, and it's just cleaning the stuff out. So for example, when I went raw, I started, you know, I had like brain fog, and, you know, I just like, I was really tired. And you might be like, oh, well, like if you go based on what we are kind of are taught, it's, oh, well, it's all the sugar, it's all, you know, whatever, you're not getting enough protein, but my hands were improving. Like it was like 2 weeks after just being on fruit that my hands started functioning.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took a little longer. I had other symptoms like, you know, going out in the sun. I couldn't go out in the sun. That took a little bit longer to heal that. But man, I was so happy to have my hands working after like, you know, 2 weeks of just that. I was like, I knew I needed to go forward. So it's just the journey isn't always a linear one. And so I think that's why it's easy, especially when, you know, raw foods hasn't been super like studied as well.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have a ton of research. There's a handful of studies out there, but it really isn't as researched and not also really talked about as much in mainstream. So when you do this, it can feel risky. And so I think a lot of times the people that try the raw vegan diet are really people like me who have really suffered from something that they're just so frustrated with. They want to answer, they want to get to the root, and they're willing to do whatever it takes because that pain is so bad. I mean, I felt like I was dying with, you know, not just the hands, but like when I would go out in the sun, I would be out there for 10 seconds and I'd be wiped out for like a week, and I would just be in excruciating pain laying in bed. Like I couldn't do it. I just felt like I was dying, and I needed to do something major. So I was willing to dive in. So, you know, I think for most people, just getting more plant-based foods is going to be like a really, really great thing to do to support your health. Like because raw vegan can feel so far out, and it does take a big commitment to do it. But that said, if you're not, suffering from something like I was, maybe you won't have all these detox symptoms and stuff that I had too. So everyone's a little bit different in that way. But it's definitely, I'm so grateful, even though I went through all this pain and horrible stuff, I'm grateful that I found the raw vegan diet, the inner child work, and now we can share all of this with other people so that we can all be healthier and happier and actually, thrive.
Exactly. I love that you brought up the fact that we are, like, you're in Chicago wearing a coat, not necessarily supposed to be living in that climate, supposed to be living in warmer climates to feel more comfortable, which is where the fruits are produced.
Yeah.
Just like that sort of, not to say, rain on anyone's parade or make anyone feel anything less than, but like that is such common sense to me on so many different levels. And the other thing that I want to notate talking about this, because I myself am not vegan or vegetarian, I consume pretty much probably an 80-20. So 80% fruits and vegetables and 20% of pizza, basically. So
there you go.
But I do. Yeah. But I have done, raw food ish, veganism or vegetarian-ish, several times throughout my life. And what I want people to realize is, just because you're on here saying, I'm raw vegan and I've been raw vegan, I'm still raw vegan, doesn't necessarily mean that you can't just try it. Even just trying for a day or a week at a time can do so much good for your body as far as just cleansing you out. Now, do we recommend, or would you, knowing what would you recommend people going back and forth and back and forth? I don't know. However, I do know that in my personal experience of doing it for weeks, 2 weeks, or a few times, a few months at a time, has done wonders for my skin, for my bowel movements, my intestines, the gassiness that I felt, my tongue, hair, all of that stuff. So, is it best to be yo-yoing back and forth? I mean, maybe not. However, if you had to choose one or the other, never versus sometimes, I feel as if sometimes would benefit you.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. And, it's a journey. Going from a lifetime of eating foods that aren't really meant for our body will definitely generate a lot of toxicity that we have to eliminate. And so we don't want to always be in constant elimination, because that can actually be taxing for our body too. So we have to take things at our own pace. And so for me, on my journey, like right now I'm doing 100% raw, but again, like I was saying before, I have done some cooked foods since having gone through that, process of doing all the fruit and really cleansing out. I actually needed to bring in some cooked foods a little bit for some time to, number one, I had actually lost a lot of weight that, a lot of times we're on this process, we do lose some weight because we're actually getting rid of all this toxic stuff that doesn't belong in our body. We're just getting rid of toxins, and we lose that, we drop that. But I definitely needed to put on a little bit of weight, and I needed that like sense of nourishment. And I think also too, like for me, even mentally, like I was vegan for kind of a short period of time before I went into the raw vegan diet. And so like, I felt like there were a lot of vegan foods, like cooked vegan foods, that I didn't really get to experience or taste or explore. So once I was able to eat those foods again, I was like, oh my gosh, like I get to try this and this and this. So it was really exciting to like come back to that. But I would get to a point where it's like, I would kind of feel something like, I don't know. Like, I think the thing is too, as you clean your body out and you do get more in tune with it, you do just kind of start to kind of intuitively notice those signals, like, it's time to like maybe go on a fast, or it's time to go raw, or like, so it's a process of listening to your body. But I do really just tune into that, my intuition, to see what I should be doing. And so, and I've made my mistakes, I for a while, like I did a lot of like high fat raw vegan, which that's actually, you know, a lot of people are concerned about the sugar. It's actually the fat that's the problem. Because especially combining fruit and fat, like I started having some like blood sugar issues where my blood sugar would dip when I would eat something. It would actually go lower, and I was getting dizzy, and I was like, what's going on here? And I was just eating way too much fat. Like I was just too much, way too much. So I had to dial back on the fat, and my body just, I think also just again, like with my healing journey, and, you know, probably my pancreas and my gallbladder aren't really, I've done some gut testing as well. So like, you know, I can see that like, my bile production probably isn't super great. And then on top of that, you know, it's like we've got, if you're cleaning out your body from toxins, a lot of us have like all kinds of like glyphosate is in our foods. So like that's something that can also prevent us from breaking down things properly. So, you know, it's a journey, and you really do have to tune in. You know, even though like, yes, we're all frugivores, at the same time, you do need to tune into your body too, and get the testing and get the support that you need, whether it's, you know, doctors and getting that testing, getting the coaching, whatever you need, because it's not just like, oh yeah, just go raw vegan for the rest of your life. That's it. You don't have to think about it again. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really work that way. You know, we're cleaning out a lot of stuff. We're kind of addicted to foods that aren't actually really for us. So we have to give ourselves grace, and we are living in climates also that aren't really natural to us. So it can also feel maybe almost natural to then be like, oh, it's wintertime, let's have some cooked foods. So how do you work with that challenge? So there's a lot of challenges that come up, not just with going raw vegan, but then sustaining it and then finding your perfect balance. And that's something that, of course, you know, with coaching that's something I do help clients work through, is like, okay, you know, when to back off and when to enjoy it, and how do I find that right balance for me?
Exactly. And I love the part where you're like, you have to find give yourself grace, because that is what it is. This isn't Armageddon. Everything's going to be okay. And if you flow in and out or around it, the main thing to be proud of is the fact that you're becoming self-aware and you're trying new things and you're looking outside the box that you've been sitting in, you know, up to this point. So be proud of yourself and give yourself a pat on the back for that. I do want to ask, you know, as far as, you know, speaking about, you know, these foods, I think it's important to realize that, you know, yes, it's helped you physically, but the change that you've been able to have through this journey has helped you so much emotionally and mentally also. It's all connected, which is what you've kind of mentioned a few times throughout this podcast. But I want to ask you, what has been the biggest disempowering belief that you've had in your life? And what did you do to change it into an empowering belief?
Ooh, so I guess there's probably been many, but I would say like the one that just comes to mind as we're having this conversation is probably like thinking that my circumstances determine my happiness. And that's not the case, actually. Like, yes, our circumstances can be challenging, but it doesn't have to determine our happiness or our self-worth or anything. Like there's always a solution to a problem, even if we can't see it. Like but that also doesn't determine our happiness. Like whether we find the solution or not, like we can come to, you know, a place of acceptance and inner peace, regardless of what's going on around us. You know, and I guess maybe me being like, you know, kind of type A and like determined and always wanting to like improve things, like it can be easy to like, you know, just get frustrated really easy when things around me aren't the way that I want it.
Yes.
You know? So it's I guess like an empowering belief to replace that would just be, I guess like that I determine my happiness regardless of what's around me. So yeah, that would be one. And then I guess just, I know you asked for one, but the other one was just like, probably just about not feeling like I'm good enough, and just replacing that with like, I'm good enough, or I'm willing to see myself as good enough, and kind of noticing like the things that give me, you know, a sense of like confidence and self-worth. So that would just be like another note to add there. But definitely, I think the thing about circumstances is the one that stands out.
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of, kind of that circumstances and where you are in this world, what's your view on trusting the universe?
Ooh, so I guess I'm more a believer in like this is kind of a switch recently, but more in God. I know that's like like a lot of people see that as interchangeable, but I guess I see the universe as being like part of God's creation. So I guess I put my faith in that, knowing, God knows that I'm here for a reason. He knows what's best for me and my path. And even if I can't see it, even if I'm in a situation that looks messy and horrible, like there's a reason for me going through that. And I would look at that as, everything I've been through with abuse and the health and finances and all kinds of stuff. Like, I feel like that was all just one step in my journey so that I could, come to faith and come to belief also in God, because I didn't have that actually before the domestic abuse or any of that. It
Wow.
was something that came through. I feel like that was like put in my path to actually help me, even though it didn't look like it. Like you would think, I mean, I would never want anyone to go through what I went through, but at the same time, now I'm able to help other people who've been through the same thing. I'm able to share my message. And because I've been through so many horrible things that kind of forced me to dive deep into like raw foods, for example. I mean, I wouldn't have gone to raw foods if it wasn't for everything I went through. But now I can share something that not only helps people like me, who are really looking for something to go to as like an alternative. It's really not an alternative. It should be the first thing that we do is look at what we eat. But, I can help also other people who are just looking to improve their lives and be healthier and live longer and be around for their kids and, be able to enjoy, not look at their life as, when I'm 90, I'm going to be in a nursing home and like on some kind of machine or something. But like, how can you live your life to the fullest with like health and supporting that? And that, like, that shouldn't be the norm. So I think I just feel passionate about helping more of the world transition that way. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for those horrible things. And I wouldn't have asked for that, but God put that in my place. And so I just have to trust that God knows what's best for me. I don't know what's best for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what do you think, speaking of that, and whether you want to say God or universe,
Yeah.
what are the lessons? What are the lessons that you are now able to teach other people because of what you've gone through in your life? What are like the biggest lessons that your life can teach others?
Oh, wow. So, I mean, I guess definitely, I like, I hesitate to be like preachy, but definitely God, if you want to look to that and have that faith, like even if something, I guess God or not, let's just say that if there's something going on in your life that doesn't seem to make sense, like if you can look at it like, how can I see this as being for me? How can I see this as being something that, maybe I can't see it right now, but it doesn't have to mean that this is it. This is the only thing that's going to happen in my life. That there is hope, that there is another side to this. There's light at the end of the tunnel. I think that, is something that I would hope that someone takes away from my journey, that, no matter how much you've struggled, like there is a way out, even if you can't see it. That would be like the biggest thing. And then of course, just paying attention to, your mind and your heart and your body and like our emotions are so important to, our fulfillment in our relationships and our, and in ourselves and in our souls. If we're off balance, it's going to show up some way in our lives physically or, in our circumstances. It's going to show up in some way. And I think so many of us, because maybe emotions are abstract, maybe we kind of dismiss it because we can't see it, but we can feel it. So if you tune into what you feel, pay attention to it, because if you allow something in your life that doesn't belong there, you're hurting yourself and your own growth and your soul and what you're meant to do. So I guess that would be the other thing, is like just the importance of that, tuning into yourself.
Absolutely. I so appreciate all of the goodness that you just shared today. It has been so overwhelming and a huge reminder for myself even, in so many different ways. So I so appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and those that are listening now and on the replay. I want to ask, anyone who's listening, who's interested in learning more about you, or, diving in, following you on social media or anything to kind of see what else you have going on. I know I have your website on the top of your name there, but can you kind of talk about what you do? What exactly do you do? And then where on social media can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram, I'm on Clubhouse. And my website's here too. But just to describe a little bit about, what I do is, I help people to awaken to their joy, their vitality, to their health through these, self-help tools and integrating their mind and their body, after they've been through some kind of, maybe trauma, or whether it be physical or mental, because these tools can really help regardless of what kind of trauma maybe we've been through. And so I help people overcome that and to come back to their natural state of health and well-being and their joy. And I help them through one-on-one coaching. I'm also looking at maybe launching a group program soon. I don't know when, but I'm definitely looking at launching a group program, especially for the raw foods, because a lot of times, we're trying to change our diet, and even going vegan can be really hard for somebody. But when you have nobody around you that's going raw vegan, and you're the only one, and you've got your family telling you should be eating more protein, and this is unhealthy or whatever,
and you're just sitting there eating a carrot stick, just pissed off of the world. That happened to me a few times, where literally I'm just like in the refrigerator, just eating like spinach or something, because I'm just like, I don't know what else. Like, I'm just so sick of, you can only like smooth so much or juice so much, and then it starts to be like, what else?
Like,
what else is there? So that's awesome. Pretty great.
And there's so many fun recipes actually that you can do with raw foods. And like when you start really getting into like the herbs and making the different dressings, it can be actually quite a lot of fun. So that's something that, I help people do. And I'm going to be doing that also in a group container soon. So I'm excited for that. But also I help people with their inner work. I'm actually certified as a coach through the Internal Family Systems Institute, which is how I learned to do my inner child work and what helped me to leave my abusive relationship. And so I just feel like that particular method could help so many people. I wish more people knew how to do inner child work, because it's something I wish that I knew many years ago. I wish that I would have had this method because it's just so efficient. So I help people work with their inner child and start to dialogue with them so they can, for example, a lot of us who've been through domestic violence, we have a really strong inner critic. Like we blame ourselves, we thought it was our fault, all this kind of stuff. And that inner critic is actually trying to protect us, but we have to update it to see that it doesn't have to do that job anymore. And we can actually transform our inner critic. So I help people transform some of those parts of them, maybe it's their inner critic or their inner people pleaser, the parts that are basically, they're trying their best to help us, but they're getting us on a path we don't really want to go down. They're maybe a little destructive in some ways. So I help support that through coaching on that level as well. So I offer both support with eating and changing the lifestyle in that regard, but also for anyone who wants to go deeper and do more of the emotional inner work. I also support that as well.
Awesome. And is all of that available on your website?
I was just going to say, so I actually have a couple of free guides if anyone's just kind of interested and wants to just get a taste of some of these things. No pun intended. With the raw foods. So if you go to my website, you can get the it's right on my website, ascendingwithalana.com. I have the freebie there for the raw foods guide. So that includes it does include a recipe for raw vegan tomato soup with only 4 ingredients. And then it has a link to gut tests, has a couple of videos, like a playlist from Dr. Robert Morse, some books on there. So basically everything to kind of just get you started with learning what is all involved. But I think the hard part is not just, it's actually quite simple. Like the raw foods diet is actually quite simple, but the hard part is, how do I stick to it? What do I do when I'm challenged? socially, or when I'm feeling, how do I make this exciting? So those are really the challenges, and that's where the coaching comes into play. But again, just to get you started, the freebie is available on my website. You can go there. For the inner child piece, I also do have an inner child resource guide. So you can just leave a comment here. I'd be happy to message anyone if it's on Facebook, or you can send me a message over my Instagram, Ascending with Alana, and just let me know that you're looking for the inner child resource guide. I can get that to you as well. So there's two free guides, depending on where you are in your journey, which you want to get started with. If you're looking at, the physical side of things and you want to get started there, the raw food guide is on my website. Just DM me if you want the inner child one.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I do want to ask, before we close up here, as far as, obviously, this is predominantly a female channel. The main avatar is females and predominantly around our age group. When, having an individual listening right now, if they've been listening this long, they obviously are, interested in this lifestyle and what we have going on and what's been being discussed. So what would be your advice to a female who is struggling just with their health in general? What would be like your 2 cents for them?
Man, I would say get a good support team. Get a good support team around you, but also, trust what you're, it can be really easy to just, the doctors say this or they say that, even sometimes they'll give, a projection of, oh, you have this long to live, or, things like that. And I just think it's so important not to take that too seriously. Like, take it with a grain of salt is what I would say. They're looking at it from a specific perspective. But that was another reason actually why I didn't go to get my diagnosis, because I didn't want to screw up my mindset into thinking, this is what I have. This is what I have for the rest of my life. This is what they're telling me. I just didn't want to feed into that at all.
I can totally relate to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would just say, the more that you can fill yourself up with plant-based foods, as we've been talking about, for this whole hour, like definitely like look into that, like do some research on, there's actually some good videos I could probably recommend too on Netflix or wherever you get your free videos, your streaming videos. What was it? Joe the Juicer. What is the name of his documentary?
Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead.
Yes. Thank you very much. Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. That's a great one. What the Health is another one. Forks Over Knives. That was the one that I saw that also like helped confirm like, it needs to do more plant-based. So yeah, I would just say the more you can go plant-based and then get support so that you're not stumbling along, trying to figure out everything yourself. I mean, I did do a lot myself, but it was a longer journey that way, trying to figure out, so when you work with someone, it's like you get to learn everything that they've learned and do it in a shorter period of time and get quicker results. And then, then you're back on track. I mean, for me, it would have been so nice to be able to start working again and to have more independence sooner, to know like, this is what I need to do for my body. Like I was losing income, like not being able to, to do those things. If I would have had those answers sooner, if I would have known that sooner, I think it just would save me time and struggle. So that's what I would say. If you're really struggling, get support. But those would be a couple of other, watch some videos and some movies if you're not plant-based at all yet, to help your mind get on board. Because sometimes it's actually our mind that stops us. That's always what it is. That's where we tend to stumble.
100%. The cool thing about those videos too is they start with the mindset of you have no idea even what any of this is. So it starts, all of those movies kind of start with the basics of some sort of premise. So it's not just like diving in head first into something. And then by the end of it, then you start to really, kind of meditate on it and think about it. And by the next day is when you kind of start to have some epiphanies. So I agree with those. Thank you for giving those out as ideas to kind of start their mind thinking in that direction. So this has been absolutely phenomenal. I so appreciate you coming on and giving me an hour or so of your time and giving us all this juicy information. Do you have any closing thoughts before I close up?
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking this time. I appreciate being here and being able to, you know, share my story, but also, again, I hope to really make an impact on other people as well. So thank you for being here. If anyone wants to follow me over on Instagram, it's Ascending with Alana is my username over there. I'm also here on Facebook. You can send me a friend request or send me a message if you're interested about learning more. And I'm on Clubhouse a lot too. So if you guys are in Clubhouse, I'm over there. So just look up Alana Vera. You'll find me there. I'm around. So
Awesome. And feel free, like I told you before, to put some of the links underneath these videos so that people can find you a little more easily. Definitely. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, Alana. I appreciate you being here with us, and I hope to have you on again coming up in the future. We have some impact panels coming up in 2022. So hopefully you'll be able to join us for those. So for those of you watching live now, I so appreciate you hanging out with us. No matter where you kind of stepped into this conversation, we appreciate you being here. And those of you that are listening on the replay, we do get back to all comments. So if you're not necessarily watching it live, but you have comments, questions, anything like that, just tag one of us and we'll make sure we get you the answer. And this is a learning platform. It's all about educating, learning, and learning from other people's experiences. So that's what we're here for, is to answer any questions and to give our input and our perspective on what's worked for us, or in this case, Alana's journey here. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Do something awesome today. Much love. Bye.
Bye-bye.